Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. The Mercosur trade deal has been long in the making, but delays and controversies have marred the contemplated agreement, which would have the European Union open up towards the influx of agricultural produce from South America, with Poland and France voicing their opposition, and farmers across the EU up in arms against the perceived threat to their livelihoods. Are there chances for the contested agreement to be amended or perhaps even reconsidered entirely? Joining us now is Jan Truszczyński, former Chief Negotiator for Poland's EU accession. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So, before we talk about the Mercosur trade deal, we should be seeing live images now from the visit of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Warsaw, which is taking place right now. What do you expect from this particular meeting? Because it has been something that we've been waiting for quite a while. It's finally happening. What do you think should be the end game here, so to say, in the course of the talks between the two heads of state?
Unequivocal Polish support for Ukraine defending itself successfully against Russian aggression, confirmation of Poland's willingness to participate in the security guarantees for Ukraine, continued support for Ukrainian military from the Polish side, and full support for Ukraine's earliest possible entry into the European Union. These should be the messages for Poles, for us here, for the Ukrainians, and for other Europeans emerging from today's talks between Zelensky and Poland's President Nawrocki.
And very quickly, any particular challenges which could be encountered along the way?
Well, we all have seen Nawrocki's first moves in behavior, in particular with regard to Ukraine. I do not trust him. I would wish to see him rising to his responsibilities and behaving like a statesman and not like a petty nationalist. We will see, of course. We will see.
Now, let's move on to our main topic concerning the Mercosur trade deal. Now, according to Politico, this has been, and I quote, kicked down the road. So essentially, there is a delay in the potential signing, but the controversies remain. What do you think will be the ultimate fate of this agreement?
There will be an agreement. There must be an agreement. It is a balanced agreement. It is an agreement that will help both Mercosur countries and the EU member states' economies. It has been long in the making. It's time to conclude. It's time to get it finally launched. It is good for the European economy. The available analysis and forecasts all show it will be beneficial. And of course, we should not dismiss farmers' concerns, but we should see clearly that all the guarantees and safeguards built into this agreement underway are more than sufficient to meet all possible concerns. Look, I have been long in the trade. I have seen it all. I have seen Spain's entry in the European Union. I have seen my own country's entry in the European Union. I have seen lots of safeguards and guarantees and provisions to make sure that nothing bad happens to farmers from whatever EU member state. And for the most part, such guarantees and such safeguards were in practice not necessary. It is very likely that also this time around, once we get the Mercosur agreement running, all those safeguards will have proved after a while as excessive and not really necessary.
Now, the current Polish government, led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who could hardly be referred to as a Eurosceptic, they say this is not a good deal. And they seem to actually be in agreement concerning this with France. Why do you think the position of the Polish government is against that? Isn't that also because there are still reservations concerning how this will impact the European agricultural market?
No, this has a lot to do with internal policy making and with the excessive power in Polish politics, in French politics, taken by the agricultural lobbies. I think, of course, there is nothing wrong in discussing matters between the lobbies and the respective governments, but at the end of the day, every government should weigh all the benefits and costs of the country's participation in trade liberalization agreements. I have always been critical of the attitudes of the Polish government in this regard. I think that the fears and concerns are exaggerated, very, very excessive, and the needs and expectations of the other parts of the Polish economy, not that of the beef farmers and poultry farmers, they are not successive. They are not taken into consideration the way they should. So, all things considered, I think that even if it has been delayed again, it will eventually be signed and already in January. I'm looking forward to that, and I would be greatly surprised to see yet another, stonewalling, yet another prolongation. It's time to conclude business.
So now we've mentioned the reservations of the farmer community, but what about the consumer market?
Not the entire farmer community. Not the entire farmer community. Look at the milk processing sector. They have been largely silent, and yet they are among those to gain from the lowering of entry barriers to the Brazilian and Argentinian markets. Those who have been really concerned are the beef farmers and the poultry producers.
There might be disagreements there, but I wanted to ask about the consumer market, because there have been questions concerning food security specifically. Now, there have been discussions surrounding the so-called reciprocity clause. This has not been included so far. That would have made it mandatory for products coming from those markets to comply with the very same rules that European producers need to comply today. Now, some people say, okay, so if we don't have these safeguards, then we might be, for example, getting food which is contaminated with pesticides. Greenpeace has held this position that this is one of the major risks concerning that particular agreement. Do you think that perhaps on that front, more needs to be done to reassure European consumers?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Short answer to your long expose, sir. I don't think so. I think we are fully secure. I think that the SPS provisions in our international trade and the border controls are more than sufficient to make sure that food contaminated with the excessive residue of pesticides not allowed within the European Union will not enter the European market. And when we talk about pesticides, does anyone know in Poland, I think that some people do, that Poland has been for many years already one of the largest importers of Brazilian soya, which is GMO product, which is a product handled with pesticides, also those not allowed on the European market, and yet there has been no criticism against Polish imports of that soya. Soya used in the Polish beef sector and soya used primarily in the Polish poultry production. So let's not be hypocritical. Let's not overplay this issue of consumer protection. Consumers have been always sufficiently protected within the European Union. Full stop.
Now let's take a look at the benefits. On the other hand, there are many countries saying, as you do, that the benefits outweigh the concerns. So what would the European Union stand to gain from this agreement if it is concluded in the current shape and form?
Well, for instance, all those pretty high tariff barriers of entry to the Mercosur markets. Take pharmaceuticals, take textiles, take machinery, take information technologies, take cars and car component parts, and so on and so forth. spirits. I mean, so many products, so many pretty high barriers, up to 35% ad valorem, and for most products between 14 and 20% ad valorem. These are pretty high walls, and they will be dismantled, and that means European products are going to be more competitive on the Mercosur market. We can expect not a surge, but a growth of European exports to South America. So overall, if you take everything into account and the current commodity structure of trade both ways, Europe stands to gain. Perhaps not a huge lot. After all, our mutual exchanges are peanuts compared to the annual trade between the United States and Europe. Nonetheless, it is not nothing. It is a diversification of trade. It is something that helps us in times of overall geopolitical and geoeconomic uncertainty, in times of more and more difficult conditions for trade between Europe and the United States. So overall, it is an agreement which is to be welcomed. I would even say embraced. It doesn't help much, but it helps, and that should resolve the issue.
Jan Truszczyński was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you very much.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and updates.